one of the best strategies for canceling out insecurity was actually optimism. And I'm very much not an optimistic person, so I was like,
If you're happy with the same old ways of dating,
if you enjoy sucking at communication,
and you have no desire to improve your romantic life, then our podcast might not be for you.
but if you want some out-of-the-box ideas to deepen your current relationships,
broaden your sexual horizons,
develop a better understanding of yourself,
or learn more about non-monogamy,
Then you've come to the right place. I'm Jase,
I'm Emily.
and I'm Dedeker.
and this is the Multiamory podcast.
I know I did, forcing me to form myself to fit.
On this episode of the Multiamory podcast, we're going to spring training for football to become defensive guards and tackle some insecurities. Thank you for bearing with me. I'm sure you were
It's
confused for a
winter.
little bit. Oh yeah, winter. Well, we're going to spring training kind of in advance. Wait,
but I thought spring training was like a baseball thing.
See, I
Football
figured.
season like a winter.
You totally ruined the metaphor, but that's okay. You
Yeah. I
like
don't
to
know if-
cross-referenced metaphor thing.
I don't know if he ruined the metaphor,
all
if he just highlighted the fact that we know absolutely nothing about sports on this show.
Just figure
Yeah.
skating. That's it.
Yeah, I guess so. But seriously, this episode, we're talking about tackling insecurities. This is a topic that we have had on our list to get to for a long time now. So it's very exciting that we're getting to this. And we're going to be covering kind of the ways that insecurities can affect our relationships and our happiness, as well as some different types of insecurities, different sort of categories of them, and how those can affect our lives. And then at the end, we're going to talk about some sort of take-home action points of things that you can do to help combat these and tackle them yourselves and get drafted in the first pick. That's a football thing.
Wait, okay. Yeah,
Drafted
okay.
in which first pick of the like the team, the like super team of confidence? Is that what it is?
Yeah, the first pick in the team of life being good.
Okay, I
Cool.
like that team.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a
Great.
good team to be a part of.
Great.
Yeah, well, I am amazed that we haven't done this yet because I think that this is something that so many people experience. I absolutely do. I think from time to time, even the two of you do. Maybe
yeah.
Jase more than Dedeker.
I hate insecurities. I hate
Yeah.
them. I have them. I hate
Yeah?
them. But then at the same time, the people that I know who seem to have no insecurities and are confident all the time are also kind of assholes. So I just don't know where to be or how to be.
Well, it's that fine line of like, how can one be or have humility, but then also be secure with themselves? And maybe like the ultimate security is also being humble. I don't know. Having both at the same time.
Yeah, that is something that came up when I was researching this, is kind of that distinction actually between humility and insecurity. And that, you know, while we tend to view humility as a good quality, right, of like being aware of the fact that we're not perfect and that we can improve and there's still stuff to learn, versus insecurity, which is kind of this, it like gets to this like I'm never good. Or I'm very rarely good enough. There's kind of this difference between like could be better versus good enough, like whether or not you live up to a certain bar that's been set in your mind, right? So I do think that's an interesting distinction to make. And I think what Dedeker's pointing out is maybe just people without humility rather than people without insecurities.
Right,
That's
but it's like how do you be in the middle path there? I think that's what I'm always struggling with is like how do I maintain a sense of humility but also don't just like crumple into like totally devastating insecurity all the time, but also how do I not tip the needle into I'm just going to like bluff my way through life as though there's nothing wrong with me and I'm great and I'm perfect and never have I heard the word insecurity, you know?
Well, it's like knowing that you know nothing, but being okay with that.
Yeah, I guess I could get on board with that.
Yeah, I have...
Well, yes?
Well, I was just going to say, like, a metaphor that comes to mind. I don't know if this is a good metaphor, but I remember when I was first, or one of the times when I was talking with a personal trainer about working out and stuff like that. And one thing they mentioned was they're like, a lot of people come in and are concerned about like, oh, well, I don't know if I want to do that or this or the other thing because I don't want to get like, all beefy and, bodybuildery looking because that's not the look I'm going for. And their response was just like, that's not a thing that can just happen. Like that's something
like,
that
bam.
The people who look like that kill themselves to get to look like that. Like that's not something that's just going to happen. And I know this isn't a perfect metaphor, but I do feel like there's a sense of like, if you even have the concern about being that arrogant person, I kind of feel like it's not so much like, oh no, I became too confident and now I'm this arrogant asshole who, thinks they're perfect and never listens to anyone else. It's like,
yeah,
I don't know. I just feel like having that concern at all is a good indication that that's not the place you're going to go.
Okay, so you're saying that I don't need to worry about by boosting my self-confidence and tackling my insecurities that I'm going to become like a football player that's too ripped. I'm going to become a football player that's like just ripped enough.
There you go.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Sure. We're back to football.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think it's interesting how like insecurity shows up in super random ways. Like Dedeker, you visited me with your partner Alex recently, and I found myself like getting really self-deprecating at times and like saying sorry a lot around Alex. And I think it was because I was like, this guy's really cool. Like, he's funny. He has an awesome accent. He's really tall. He seems very, like, accomplished at his job. And so, like, I'm just going to, like, apologize a lot and, like, self-deprecate. And I was like, wow, that's not something I should be doing right now. But I saw it happening a lot. I was, like, trying to internally look at myself throughout that situation. So, yeah.
That's so interesting. I didn't notice that
strange.
at all.
I definitely did.
I'll have to talk to Alex and see if he noticed it. That's really,
You're probably
really
just used to it with me by now, but
a little bit.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I guess the first thing that I wanted to talk about here is the fact that like when we're riddled with insecurities, not even riddled, even when you just have a couple insecurities, it can keep you in a really bad feedback loop. Essentially, the idea being that it's like, okay, like maybe you're in a situation that you want to improve. Maybe you want to apply for a better job. Maybe if you want to start a new project, maybe if you want to pursue someone that you're interested in, whatever it is that like, okay, that in itself is like the issue you're trying to tackle. But then if you have insecurities, those tend to take away your resources for problem solving and for coping. And so it saps away all your resources where you're dealing with your insecurities, either stressing about them or trying to handle them or trying to get them to stop being so present in your mind or in your life or whatever. And that's taking away the resources and energy that you would normally be using towards accomplishing the thing you want to accomplish. I feel like, gosh, I run into this all the time, particularly recently because of the fact that I'm really interested in writing another book. But instead of spending my time actually taking steps towards doing that and like writing a proposal and stuff like that, I'm caught in this feedback loop of like, oh my God, I'm such an imposter. And trying to figure out how to handle that instead of actually putting my energy toward the thing itself. And so that's definitely something that can gut us, not just in like our professional lives, but also in our romantic relationships as well.
Yeah. In going into the romantic relationship part, I think that even if somebody is with us and has been with us for a long period of time, we can get in this loop of saying, like, I'm not worthy of them, or they don't actually want to be with me. And it can get us into treating our partner like they don't want to be with us and we're not deserving of them. And then, that can just eventually lead to like these self-fulfilling prophecies coming true. And your partner maybe eventually getting fed up with that and deciding to leave, which is very sad. And really, like, nobody is immune to this. I do look at people, especially in Los Angeles, who seem very successful, who are very successful at their jobs. And some of those people are, unfortunately, like the most insecure people that I know for whatever reason. Even though, like, one would think that they have everything in the world to be secure about.
Right. No, I've definitely experienced that where sometimes it's almost like I see this inverse effect between like how successful or how attractive or how rich a person is. And it is like this inverse ratio to how insecure about all that they are. And that's not like, I don't know, I don't want to make a blanket statement. That's just anecdotal of like what I've noticed among the people that I've met in my life. But I think it does just go to show that, external factors can be a part of your sense of security, but most of the time, a big chunk of it is how you deal with yourself internally and what's going on internally, what's going on in your past, what's your baggage from childhood, like all these things that can still fuel these very deep-seated insecurities. It's not just related to, accomplishing the things that you want to accomplish or getting the body that you've always wanted or getting the income you've always wanted.
Yeah, it reminds me of this thing that gets mentioned a lot in certain sort of like mindfulness and positive psychology sort of stuff, which is this idea of like putting your happiness in the future. That it's like, it's also, I guess we've talked about on the show before, of that idea of like, what is it, fear and hope, or the twin dragons guarding the gates to heaven, or whatever, that Isn't whole that thing.
Yeah, Shambhala again.
Yeah, I don't actually think it's from the Shambhala Sacred Path of the Warrior book, but maybe from a different
Steve
book.
Easton
or something, yeah. But the idea being that fearing everything that's going to happen is going to keep you from being in the now, like in the moment, and instead you're just worrying about all the bad things that will happen. And in this case, hope means this idea that like, well, eventually once I get to that, then I'll be happy.
Then I'll be
like,
happy, yeah.
I hope I'll get this thing, then I'll be happy. And again, you're not actually being happy right now. And I think I've also brought this up before too, but just like in interviews at sort of the height of her career, Oprah has said that was the time she was the most depressed and the most miserable in her life. Because it's this thing of like, you're always putting your happiness in these goals you're getting to. And even if you get to the top of that, it's like, well, where do I go from here?
It's always, what are you doing next? Like, that's what people say, instead of just living in the moment and being appreciative of the things that you have right then.
Yeah. And I'm particularly bad about that one, about being very goal oriented and kind of thinking toward the future instead of like actually appreciating what I have right now. Yeah, but that's one that always hits home for me. Yeah. So let's move on into talking about some different categories and different manifestations of insecurity. So the first of these three categories we're calling recent events. So this is things like insecurities based on failure and rejection that have actually happened in your life, right? About the time that, you were last in the draft pick on your football team, or see how I brought that back again?
Well done. Yeah. This episode is just about football, actually.
Yeah, apparently. That maybe is going on right now. I have no idea. This may or may not be football season.
Oh no, it is. It is, because like the Super Bowl is in the
February, right?
In February. So
okay, cool.
Yeah, it's going on.
Perfect time.
Good job.
So we're right in the middle of football time.
Dedeker's
so it's important to distinguish that these are about things that have actually happened in the past that you now have insecurities about today.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a thing to bear in mind is that actually studies on happiness have shown that up to 40% of our quote-unquote happiness quotient is based on our recent life events, not just past life events. But I do think it's interesting that that is a minority, that our happiness, that our external circumstances influence our happiness to like a 40% degree, that it isn't a majority, which I think that we can sometimes be fooled into thinking is the case, that like if we just kind of surround ourselves with things that make us happy externally, then we will be happy or will feel secure.
So does that mean 60% is internal or what? Or it's not event related necessarily, it might just be other things, and probably a lot of that is internal?
Guess, 60% is probably like mental, emotional, inner life, kind of internal workings based, something like that. Anyway, but things like, if you did recently have a failure, if you did recently get rejected for a date or for, a job interview, or you were passed over for a promotion or something like that, like those things can definitely have an effect on your self-worth, on your self-esteem, and your sense of security as yourself.
Yeah, and there is this thing, like, if we as people have low self-esteem already, then when these difficult negative events happen, we're more likely to see ourselves and other people more negatively as well. So it kind of, if you do have some self-esteem built up, like, then it allows you to be a little bit more resilient in those moments when something bad happens to know, okay, this is in a moment in time, I can move on. It's not necessarily about me, or even if it is, it's something that I can pick myself back up from. But instead, if you do have that low self-esteem, it's more challenging to be able to do that.
Yeah, I feel like this is also the one where we can kind of get in that idea of, oh, well, this thing happened to me in the past, so that must be a problem with me, and it's always going to happen again. And so you're so focused on that you almost like find situations where that's going to happen again, because that's at least comfortable and doesn't challenge your belief of who you are and what you deserve and things like that.
I mean, we can attach belief to anything, really. Like, that's a really good point. Yeah, we can find like the thing that we believe to be true in that story and just say, well, this has to be the case. I am shitty for this reason or whatever. So yeah, exactly. Or that these things all must be my fault, so therefore this is what people think of me. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the next one is going to be relational. So that includes social anxiety and also our old friend, attachment insecurity. So we've talked about attachment styles and attachment theory on this show, specifically in episode 82. But all of that kind of relates to this relational manifestation of insecurity.
Yeah. So, I mean, one example of this is job interviews. So not even talking about romantic relationships here, but it's this being super critical of yourself, kind of in relation to how other people think about you, but not based on the past, but how you expect them to behave to you, right? So like going into an interview or a first date or going to a party or, a meetup or something with a lot of this like loud voice in your head that's giving you the criticism of why people aren't going to like you, or why, you're not going to get the job, or why this person isn't going to want to see you, or why you're unattractive today, or right. The list goes on and on and on about what those things could be. And this, I think, could also be related to past experiences, right? Like if you've had past experiences about, not fitting in as a kid or something like that you can bring those with you. And I think the differentiation between these is one's kind of about like, I'm worried about these past events repeating, or I value myself this way because of these things that happened in the past, versus this is more when you're now projecting into the future, right? Or projecting into other people's minds.
And that also goes along with the attachment theory stuff as well, because like that is sort of based on your relationship with your parents as a child. And so if your parents tended to be really attachment heavy and like they were helicopter parents and always were around you, but then if you did something wrong, they tended to like retreat, then you may feel more of an anxious attachment style. Or you may be like the type of person to also, what is the attachment style that, Dedeker, you've said you are at times?
Avoidant.
I am definitely 100% avoidant.
Yeah, avoidant, exactly. And that can also be like a cause of parents just sort of avoiding their children, or, giving them a lot of free time, and you deciding like as an adult, you're going to be a little bit more avoidant in your relationships as well.
Yeah, so that's the thing, is that like insecurities can come up, related to what your attachment style is. It's actually quite common in romantic relationships, so it can be things like, if you tend to be a person who's more avoidantly attached, that if a partner asks for something from you or needs to rely on you in some way, if like maybe it brings up this insecurity of like, oh, like, I'm not a reliable person, or no one can actually love me or the way I am or whatever. And so I'm going to pull away. I'm going to be avoidant or I'm going to be distant. And this can also be triggered in the opposite, that it can manifest as when you feel insecure about, a partner not being there, or you not being able to live up to a partner's expectations. It can trigger behavior that's like really clingy or anxious, if you're anxiously attached. And it's important to talk about, because the fact that, our insecurities coming up, it's always going to be a mix of like internal and external factors. And what I think with the attachment styles thing is that it's very much a mix of both, that it can be very much like your internal baggage of like stuff that you've carried with you into adulthood from your childhood relationships, but also can be influenced by what your partner's attachment style is. You know, it's really classic to see someone who's anxiously attached, someone who tends to get more clingy or more needy, with someone who's avoidantly attached, and they just set each other's insecurities off back and forth and back
Constantly.
and forth. You know, the avoidant person pulls away, and so that means the anxious person feels like, oh gosh, they're pulling away. What's going to happen? I don't feel very secure in this relationship, so they cling on. And then, you know, the avoidant person is like, oh God, they're clinging on to me. It's way too much. I need to pull away more. And so it just becomes this back and forth fueled by these kind of matched up insecurities that tend to set each other off.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think this one also just comes up in more like social anxiety situations as well, of just being in like groups, going to, you know, being new somewhere. I know that's one that comes up for me a lot, like going to a place where I don't know people. Like that is definitely a place
get anxious or?
Oh yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Of just this like, oh gosh, I'm going to say something wrong and everyone's going to hate me. Or this used to come up for me a ton when I was doing more performing as a musician, specifically when I was playing in bands. That
You'd be like, I'm going to sing something and everyone's going to hate me.
No, it would kind of be after.
Never happened.
It would kind of be after the fact. And I actually talked to a therapist about this back when I was living in Seattle and was performing and singing in bands and stuff like that. As I was just like, I feel like when I perform that like everyone there is like, ugh, who is this guy up there like singing, thinking people want to listen to him? Like this sucks. And, you know, her kind of question to me was this like, oh, did someone there say that to you? I was like, well, no, but like I felt like I could kind of, you know, that was what they were probably feeling. And she kind of brought up for me this idea, like we were talking about, where you're sort of projecting either into the future or into other people's minds what you think they're thinking, rather than basing that on evidence. So I guess that's another way it sort of differs from the stuff that's based on recent events, even though obviously
That's
they're
interesting
all
because
related.
I feel like now, Jase, I still see the same thing come up with you. It's just instead of singing, it's like, oh, I did this podcast live show, and
everyone hates me.
Yeah, everyone in the audience hated me. I'm
Dedeker and I are the
sure.
ones who have to pick you up after that.
Yep, it's true. It's still there. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I actually think this is a good transition because I do think a big part of that is our third category of, you know, kind of kinds of the ways that insecurities can come up. And that's in the realm of personal judgment. So things like feeling a strong sense of perfectionism or a strong sense of comparison. And I will 100% say that this is me to a T.
Oh yeah. No, ditto. And it's interesting because like, I think I grew up with a lot of comparison in my life. Like people compared me to my mother, and then my mother compared me to my friends. Or she even does it sometimes, like looking out at women, and she's like, "Oh, that girl is looking at you. Like she probably like wishes that she were as pretty as you or something." And I'm like, maybe she's just like looking at me. Like I look at women and I'm like, damn, like that's an amazing outfit. Like I wish I had that outfit, or just like, I think that she looks really great today. And I'm like, I don't know if she's necessarily comparing herself to me or like wanting to be something that I am. Maybe she's just looking and interested. And I think like that shift in the idea of comparison, instead of being like, I want something that they have, rather just saying like, that person looks lovely today, or how nice for them, as opposed to like really comparing myself and like my, you know, shortcomings to all of the things that they have. It's interesting, just that small distinction. But yeah, I mean, we have so much pressure, especially in America, to like have the best job, like the highest salary, to look a certain way, or have like an ideal partner or an ideal family. Constantly right now, everyone is getting married on my Facebook feed. Everyone's getting married and having a baby like right this second. So, yeah, I mean, that is, I think, especially when you like hit 30 and just life starts throwing you like what the perfect idea is of all of those things. It's easy to be like, well, I'm not doing that. I'm clearly not perfect for a variety of reasons.
Well, yeah, I think that is so interesting that it's like we don't get told this objective version of what perfect is. None of us know objectively actually what perfection is, but we do get told this very subjective version of what perfection is. And it is, you know, having your traditional monogamous marriage and your 2.5 kids who are adorable and well-behaved, and you're working a job that like you love so much that it doesn't feel like work, but it also happens to be able to like pay off all your student debt and help you support a family. And then also on top of it, don't have any pores. Do not have any visible pores. No visible pores, please. No acne. No flyaways. Please be thin and have the best sex ever. You know, like it's interesting that it's just this very like prescribed version of what perfection is. Yeah. And we still kind of hold ourselves to that very perfectionist standard.
I mean, not everyone, but yeah. It's funny, like on Facebook, I saw this like birth announcement, or this announcement that someone was pregnant, and it was like this couple like with a white picket fence, like with snow all around them. And I was like, wow, okay. This is like the definition of what like perfection, what people think that perfection is so often. And that's great for them. It is really lovely. But if that is not your reality, being able to find within you that that's okay and that you're not doing something wrong, I think it's easier said than done sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think this can also come up even not just conforming to the kind of conventional standards of perfection or of success, but also in your own community or just in the people that you idolize or look at. And this is something that I've heard many people, like, for example, in the bisexual community. I cannot even tell you how many people I've heard stories from about like not feeling like they're queer enough because they're bi. Or, right, or that they're bi, but they're still cisgender. And so, like, they really don't, like, they aren't queer enough, right? Whatever it is, that there's this, again, this, like, arbitrary standard of perfection or something. And ironically, I think all of us can find ways to be imperfect, no matter what. And part of that is, well, yeah, sorry, go ahead, Emily.
Well, no, I mean, I've definitely questioned myself. I'm like, can I call myself queer? And because like, but you know, I think I can. I think it's okay. I definitely am.
Yeah. Well,
but yeah, absolutely. It is that question of like, am I enough? Am I this enough? For sure.
And part of that is this tendency we have to compare our weakest points to other people's strongest points, right? Is this idea that because, and I think that this is not something that the internet or social media created, but I think it makes it much easier to look at just the bright and shiny things that other people show you about their lives, and that we can have this kind of tunnel vision where we just look at the ways in which these people are successful in the ways that I'm not, or the way that they, you know, are whatever in the ways that I'm not, rather than looking more for like, oh, this person's similar to me in this way, or like, oh, I'm doing really well in this way. It's so much easier to focus on where we're not, right? And that's kind of that perfectionism and comparison.
Dedeker,
right.
What are you even insecure about?
Are you serious right now?
Yes, I am. Like, you just like never to me like exhibit any insecurity ever.
Oh, well, it's okay because I exhibit it to myself plenty enough.
Okay.
Plenty enough. I don't know. Actually, that's funny. That's something that actually I will talk about a little bit more in the bonus content.
Okay. All right.
You know, tune in and become a Patreon subscriber if you want to find out if Dedeker has any insecurities at all. No, I'm just kidding. I'll talk about it a little bit more in our bonus content. But actually, it's funny because I feel like at least right now where I'm at in my life, I don't feel like I have a lot of relational insecurity. Like I feel like in my relationships I feel relatively securely attached, you know. I mean, I still have some avoidant tendencies and some insecurities that come up, but as a whole I feel pretty, you know, pretty secure in my relationships. However, like all my insecurities right now are all more in my professional life, in a lot of imposter syndrome that comes up, or in a lot of like getting down on myself for not creating enough or not writing enough or not doing enough or not, whatever. And again, it's all these same things that we've talked about. It's like not only the standard of perfection of like what I've been told I need to look like or be like in order to be like successful or perfect, combined with also comparing myself to other people that I know who are writers or content creators or who are, in the same field as I am. That I look at all that. And again, I compare like my weakest points to other people's clearly stronger points. And of course, I'm never going to come out ahead in that comparison. So yeah, I don't know. That's where I feel like my insecurities lie these days. I also have kind of some dry skin under my eye that looks bad that I'm kind of insecure about right now. If you really want to keep getting super specific.
Very specific and very right now. Man. Yeah.
What about you, Emily? What are you insecure about these days?
Absolutely everything.
Everything?
No, I mean, I'm insecure about the wrinkles that I'm getting because I'm 30 now. I'm insecure.
I'm insecure about my wrinkles too.
I was like, I want to take a picture of myself at Disney, like with my stage makeup on, and then compare it to hopefully next year a picture of myself with my stage makeup on at Disney to see like the changes from 30 to 31. Maybe I shouldn't do that.
So you're like already planning for some more like insecurity generating content
you're
for yourself?
Right. Look at there it is. You called me out of my own bullshit. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate that. No, I mean, yeah, like I'm also insecure about like the things that I create, that I'm like not, the successful actor that I want to be, and that I don't have a shit ton of money, but I also like get to travel a whole hell of a lot too, and I make a great podcast with my two best friends, so like really, it's gonna be okay. And I live in Los Angeles, which is cool sometimes. Kind of.
Jase, Jase, what are you insecure about these days?
Oh man. I definitely resonate with you, Dedeker, on the professional field there of just being like, I'm 36 now. I should have this figured out in terms of like making lots of money and having a cool stuff, or I don't know. And it's, as I say it, I'm like, I know that's ridiculous because a lot of people look at my situation and are like, dude, like I wish I could do that and travel for half the year and have a job the rest of the year. And that sounds fantastic, but there's still a lot of that like personal doubt and comparison that comes up. And then of course I'm also thinking about writing a book and just the terrifying prospect of that. And just how, like, feeling that sense of like everyone must have hated me after something I said at a live show or at a party or whatever, to think about that amplified in a book that's now written down so everyone can continue to come back and hate me about it.
Welcome to my world.
Right? That's terrifying. That's super terrifying to me. So that one definitely comes up.
Well, great. We're all insecure.
Yeah, we're all insecure. Got it.
Welcome to the world.
Yeah. Well, we're going to move on and talk a little bit more about the ways that you can help to tackle body slam, pile drive. I don't know
none
what
of
the
those
verbs
things are football things.
Are they not?
Tackle
I thought that
is.
she was, pretty close to something there.
Okay, so now I'm feeling another layer of insecure that we're also insecure. So let's talk about ways to deal with that, shall we?
Yes.
Oh, boy.
Yes, let's.
All right. So something that, to go back to what I was talking about with the therapist that I talked to years ago about performing as a musician, and her question of kind of like, well, did people tell you that? Like, where are you getting that from? Because it seems like a lot of people actually appreciated it, right? People clapped, like these people bought you a drink after the show, like, kind of whatever it was from my stories. It's like, it sounds like you actually have more evidence that people liked it than evidence that people didn't. And in a similar way to that, when it comes to things like relationships or, other parts of your life, is going to the people who actually know you the best. And those are your friends. Those are your romantic partners. It's maybe your family, right? The people who know you the best and who are actually invested in you, and getting feedback from them, right? And that those people, hopefully, even if their feedback is constructive, we'll say, in some areas, that isn't just like, you're perfect. But even if those are the people who will give you constructive feedback, they're also going to tell you the things that are good about you and the things that they like about you and the reason why they're your friend or why they're in a relationship with you. And then I think the key ingredient here is actually believing them when they tell you. And it sounds so simple, and yet it can be so hard.
I'm saying thank you instead of like, no, I'm not like that. I'm not worthy of what you're telling me.
Yeah, on our Communication Hacks Booster Pack episode that we did a while back, Dedeker and I talked about our microscript of saying, why thank you, in like when you feel that urge to be like, no, I'm not, I'm terrible, or whatever it is, to just like program yourself to be like, why thank you, or like, yes, you're right, thank you.
Or even like if somebody says like, oh, you're being really nice, like that's also like saying that you don't believe them in just like a softer way.
That's
but I
totally
do that all the time.
That's totally you.
Oh, I know. Exactly. I know.
Yeah, yours is you're so kind. You're so kind. That's what you say instead of thank you. Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. Yeah. Check yourself for those things.
Absolutely.
One thing that I particularly liked, that this was actually a different therapist more recently was talking to me about, was in talking to your partners or your friends versus maybe some negative feedback you have gotten from somebody else, right? Who thought you were a jerk or who didn't like X, Y, or Z about you. Is she asked the question of who is more credentialed to tell you reliably about you? Some random person or some person who's known you for a little bit versus someone who spends a lot of time with you or has been a friend for a long time or a family member who's known you a long time, and really asking that question. And for me, at least right then, that was kind of what I needed to hear, of realizing in the particular situation that I was feeling a lot of insecurity about, that Dedeker, who was being very supportive to me, was more credentialed than random person who had criticized me, right? Like, and just kind of that idea of like credentialed kind of stuck with me. And I was like, I like that. I like that idea of how to think about it. So rather than just like, oh, well, they're my friend, so of course they're going to say nice things, or they're my partner, you could also think they're way more qualified to talk about me and to understand me than someone else.
Some rando.
Yeah.
Totally.
I like that shift of like checking a person's credentials. It sounds weird to say it that way, but it is kind of like that, of like checking in and being like, oh yeah, no, this person is close to me and they do have a better sense of who I am, what I'm good at, what I'm not good at. Like they're the one who, you know, can more accurately weigh in on who I am rather than a rando or whoever.
I initially thought that when you said credentialed, that you were going to be like, well, this person like has a PhD, so like they're more credentialed in life, and so if they say that I'm a good person, then I must be.
This is a very particular credentialing. This is credentialed in knowing you. It's a very specific credential.
Totally. Yeah. So the next one is to examine the stories that you tell yourself about your flaws. And I think this is really important because so often we like get ourselves in this hole about all of the things that we do wrong, or like you had said before, like, okay, well, these events in my past keep occurring, and so there must be a reason for it, or like I therefore just must be a bad person or whatever. But if you do examine like those specific moments and those things and the reasoning behind like why these occurrences keep happening, then you can probably start to dig out things about yourself and also like truths into, well, maybe I should work on this thing about myself, but this other thing is really actually wonderful. And I do that really well. Looks like you want to say something, Dedeker.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, this reminds me of, you know, this whole thing with the stories that we tell ourselves about our insecurities and about our flaws and things like that. It actually reminds me of relatively early on when I was first exploring non-monogamous and polyamorous relationships, that if a partner of mine like started dating someone new And I would like, first of all, I'd play the comparison game. Like I'd compare myself to that other person and see all the ways that like I was lacking and they were not. But not just the ways that I felt that I was lacking, also just the way this other person was different. Where it'd be like, oh, this person is a bartender and this person likes horror movies and this person also gosh, I don't know, likes this particular type of music. And the story that I would tell would be, oh, that means my partner must want that and not want me.
Totally.
They don't want all, my flawed self. They want what this person is offering them. And then, then of course that story would continue to be like, okay, well, I guess I need to strive to be more like that other person if I'm going to keep making my partner happy. And it took a lot of like embarrassment and painful lessons to kind of learn like, no, actually, I need to lean more into the things that make me, like, because that's why my partner's with me. That's why we're in the relationship together, is because I'm me and they're them and their other partner is themselves, and that's okay. But it is just so funny how it's like that story of like, oh, okay, that means that my partner wants these things in this partner. They don't want me. Like, it's just like, that comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, and I mean, that does kind of touch on the next one, which is like, don't blame your partner for your insecurities either. So don't tell yourself, okay, my partner must want something that I'm not because they're interested in this other person that has a bunch of qualities. Like, don't automatically assume that your partner isn't interested in you because they also find X, Y, and Z to be attractive. And then, I mean, the hard thing is we do get into these loops of like, okay, my partner must want this thing and therefore like they don't love me enough, or I am unlovable in some way. And then we can tend to like lash out at our partner in certain ways because we feel unloved or we feel like they're not giving us what we need. And really it is mostly just about us in those moments.
Yeah, I think that this isn't something that you can just kind of do and all of a sudden it's fixed, but moving away from the relationship escalator actually, I think, is big and has been really big for me, because there's that idea of like, even being polyamorous is looking at like, oh, well, what's that next step? Kind of like we talked about in career terms. Yeah. Of like, well, if things are actually good, then I must be getting to this next step. Like it kind of always gives you like this thing to put your happiness on in the future. It's like, oh, once we're living together, then I'll be secure and then I'll be happy. Or once I'm, whatever, their primary partner, then I'll feel secure. Or once we share a cell phone plan, or like whatever it is, once we start a podcast about polyamory together, like then I'll be secure. And that I found that for me, actually, this is something that has made a huge difference, where just being kind of entirely detached from the relationship escalator, or at least very detached from it, I feel like it's allowed me to actually appreciate my relationships that I have.
Interesting.
A lot more, rather than always thinking, oh, but I'll be happy once I get to this. That's been a big change. And just, sorry, what you were talking about kind of not blaming your partner for this, I think also kind of not blaming like the state of your relationship for it maybe is related. Anyway, that just kind of made me think about the relationship escalator, and now that was a big pivotal thing for me in getting away from that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I think that's actually a good segue to, I'm going to give another callback to attachment style, but I found that just being aware of what your attachment style is, can take you so far, in just being able to know like, oh, okay, I'm anxiously attached. So that means that when I feel like there's a crisis or I feel like my partner's pulling away, that then, these insecurities about my partner leaving me or abandoning me or whatever come up, and being able to talk about that with your partner, even being able to have a conversation with your partner about what their attachment style is, it can really open up so much for you just in being aware of it in the first place, so that then the two of you can strategize on what are the best ways that we can make each other feel more secure, or what are the ways that we individually can help to heal ourselves to feel more secure. So even just that, and again, you can go back and listen to episode 82. You can just do a Google search of attachment theory, even if it's just reading the freaking Wikipedia. There's a bunch of like quizzes and self-assessment tools and stuff like that to figure out what your attachment style is. But just having a little bit of that knowledge can really help with at least giving a foundation of like when insecurities come up within your relationship, that you can be like, okay, I know what this is. I know that this is probably something related to my attachment, or I know that maybe this is something related to the way my partner attaches. And then that's the beginning of a conversation rather than just a crisis of feeling terrible and insecure.
Yeah. And it's interesting because a lot of the books and articles on attachment theory talk about if you are in a relationship with someone who is secure, that they can potentially pull you more into being secure yourself, which I wouldn't like bank on that always in all of your relationships. Like, and just hope like, oh man, I hope that I'm getting a relationship with a secure person and therefore like my problems will be solved. But there is something to be said for if you do happen to be in a relationship with a more secure person to, you know, learning their ways in a way and allowing yourself to like bask in that security and bask in like the knowledge that, hey, there's no push pull here in a way that I'm used to where like somebody pulls away and then I get really clingy kind of thing. Rather, they're helping me to find that security within myself and within my relationship.
Yeah. And really with all of this is actually finding therapy or counseling or a coach or something like that is big. This is, you know, not to say that, oh, I'm an anxious attachment person and I'm in a relationship with someone who's avoidant attachment and we're just doomed. Or I need to break up with them and find someone who's secure attachment style, right? Like that's not what we're saying. But if that is the case, and if you're able to recognize that, that can help be a clue to say, hey, let's find a therapist to help us with this, to help us learn more about this. Let's read those books. But I think there's something just so valuable about actually having someone to talk to about it. And I'm generally someone who always encourages people to try to do therapy on your own, primarily. Like doing couples therapy, I think can be useful, but I think really having your own therapist or counselor or coach is way more important. And so if you're only gonna, you know, say you're like, I can only afford to do one or the other, definitely do it for yourself, because that's gonna help you and your relationship much more than just doing the couples therapy. And I also wanted to point out that there are a lot of opportunities for this. I know that, you know, it's like every character on TV has a therapist, but we all have this idea that they cost, you know, hundreds of dollars every appointment and they go every week, and because everyone on TV is rich and successful and has huge apartments in New York. But the reality of it is that even during times in my life where I was super broke, I was able to find counselors or therapists who either had sliding scales or who were like social workers that you could go see for free, or who were counselors at, say, your university who you could go see for free, or, you know, like I said, people who do sliding scale, stuff like that. That there are a lot of opportunities out there, and it's worth just looking and asking about it. Even things like BetterHelp, or what's the other one? Talkspace.
Talkspace.
That those sort of online ones where you subscribe for a monthly amount, that those, they don't advertise it up front, but they actually have cheaper packages. Like if you didn't want to do phone calls and just have a therapist that you can write messages to every day, that's significantly cheaper than the normal plan they seem to tell you is the only plan. And they also offer a sliding scale for people who can't afford it. So there really are a lot of options out there. And so don't feel discouraged like this is something that's not accessible to you.
Yeah. So this is a tough one, but it's very important. Franklin Vo talked about this in some of the articles that we were reading regarding this episode when we were doing some research for it. But he said that understand and accept that heartbreak and something like the end of a relationship that both of those things are survivable. Survivable. Vivable. Survivable. That you will survive. I will survive those things. So even if you do get broken up with, or if like a relationship just ends, it will be hard, obviously, but you are not going to die from it of a broken heart. You will move on, and it will be difficult, but it is a thing that you can move on from. So even if you are super insecure about a relationship ending, just know that, you know, nothing necessarily is forever, and if it does end, you can survive from that.
That is a tough one. That's like a really tough truth, I think, to internalize. I think that it can be relatively simple for some of us to mentally and logically get on board with that, of like, yeah, sure, you know, a relationship could end, whatever, and my heart could get broken whenever, and you know, obviously it won't kill me or anything like that. But to actually internalize that is a hard one, and especially because we've also been trained from the moment we entered this world that it's like, you know, you need to do everything in your power to hang on to a relationship. You know, and you need to be doing everything in your power to make sure that your partner doesn't even consider leaving you, or doesn't have any kind of opportunity that might inspire them to leave you or to want someone else, or things like that. And yeah, like, I guess training yourself out of that is a process, but I think that it can help to balance out a lot of that relational insecurity, you know, again, like a lot of that just kind of like bad feedback loop, like suffering that puts us into a state of like worrying more about the loss of the relationship than about like actually maintaining the relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's a tough one, but important to know for yourself, like, truly it will be okay. And in the moment, I think that that's easier said than done. When you feel like this relationship could end at any moment, or it's just like really not going well, how am I going to survive without it? Like, you will. Like, humans are very adaptable creatures. We can do it.
Yeah, I think just real quick to bring it back to what we were talking about earlier about kind of comparisons, and also sort of our status that we're taught we should have, that a relationship is part of that. And the idea of a relationship ending, even if it's not one that's fulfilling for you or isn't happy for you, or, you know, is not happy enough of the time, right? Or isn't for the other person, that there's kind of that idea of like, well, if I lose that, then I'm less good of a person because I'm checking fewer of the boxes I'm supposed to. And so with all these things we're talking about here with these action points, they're things that you can definitely combine with each other, and actually should. This isn't like pick one from the list. This is like do all of these things, because in helping to work on your security and feeling more okay with who you are, will actually, I think, can empower you to feel more capable of surviving that situation. Yeah. Similarly, having more of a support network or having a therapist or counselor or coach to talk to about things will make that seem more possible, right? That all these things can kind of affect each other in good ways and help each other.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. And I think that also leads to, you know, our last couple points here, which is it's so important to learn to value yourself and to find strategies to work around what's known as like conditional self-esteem, or some people also call it conditional insecurity, which is the idea of like, sure, like when I'm feeling great and like my job's going well and I'm earning money and I'm going on, you know, a bunch of dates with hot people or whatever, then I feel great about myself and I feel very securely attached to everyone. But then when things are not going so great, when something went bad at work, or I was rejected, or I failed in some way, or my partner's off on a date with someone else or whatever, then I feel like crap, you know, and then I feel very insecure. And, you know, finding ways to just cope and break out of that cycle of just the back and forth of like your self-esteem and your security just being attached to these external factors. And it requires, you know, the work that we've been talking about here, you know, figuring out your attachment style, talking to people that you trust to get feedback about yourself, asking for reassurance from a partner, going to therapy, things like that. There's another strategy that actually there was this study conducted by Peking University about insecurity, and they found that one of the best strategies for canceling out insecurity was actually optimism. And I'm very
That's
much
nice.
not an optimistic person, so I was like, huh? What?
Oh,
How?
I don't know
Why?
about that.
Well,
No,
do
I'd
I
agree
seem
with that.
optimistic on the outside? Yeah, Jace knows.
Well, I've got the all access pass though, so
yeah, Jace, it's true.
I see her a lot too, but I don't know. Maybe Jason and I are optimistic enough for the three
I think
of us.
that's
I think that's the case. I think the two of you carry definitely the load of, you carry the optimism labor
That's fine.
on this
That's
podcast.
fine. You're pragmatic, and I appreciate that.
Yeah. I am. That's true. But okay, so here's the thing: is that the study found that when it comes to insecurity, like when you're optimistic, you tend to attribute events that could have negative consequences. You tend to look at them in a different filter that reduces the amount of threat that they hold. Primarily because when you're optimistic, you're able to see those events as being outside of you, that they're caused by outside factors that will change for the better, that have to change for the better just over the course of time. And it's the same thing with insecurities about yourself, insecurities about relationship, insecurities about your job, things like that. And so there's this movement, this kind of relatively new movement known as radical optimism. I just learned about it from following the Instagram account of Adian Dowling, who is I don't know if you don't know him, he's the first trans man who was on the cover of Men's Health magazine.
Oh, right. I remember hearing about that.
Yeah. His Instagram account is super amazing, and he labels himself as a radical optimist. And so the idea behind radical optimism is that, you're not denying that there's major problems in the world. You're not denying that potentially things may go wrong. There may be catastrophes. You're not denying that sometimes things are sad or confusing. But the radical part of it is that it is the choice to always look for the good in something, even when it seems clear that something is bad, but still choosing to look for the good. And I think it makes sense to me on a logical level, like in moments when you're feeling insecure, especially about yourself, about your own personal attributes or things like that, of like really making that radical choice to like, no, in this moment, even when I feel like shit, I'm going to choose to find something good here or look for something good here. That it can be a really good starting point for being able to just kind of snap out of feeling so funky about one's insecurities. Yeah. Again, like I said, I'm really not an optimist, and so optimism at all feels very radical to me. But I think this is one I need to try. Yeah, this is one I think I need to try on for myself and see how it goes.
That's lovely. I like that. Well, we're really, really interested in hearing about all of the ways in which our listeners combat insecurity. And, do you have any like special secret stashes or like special things that you just do to make yourself feel better in insecure moments? So talk to us about it. The best place to share your thoughts with other listeners is on this episode's discussion thread in our private Facebook or Discourse forums. You can get access to these groups and join our exclusive community by going to patreon.com/multiamory. In addition, you can share with us publicly on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. You can email us at info@multiamory.com, leave us a voicemail at 678-MULTI05, or you can leave us a voice message on Facebook. Multiamory is created and produced by Dedeker Winston, Jase Lindgren, and me, Emily Matlack. Our episodes are edited by Mauricio Balvanera. Our social media wizard is Will McMillan. Our theme song is Forms I Know I Did by Josh and Anand from the Fractal Cave EP. The full transcript is available on this episode's page on multiamory.com.